Hello, beautiful people of the internet. My name's Shelby. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is the best and worst books of 2023. And this is combined because I had arguably the worst reading year I've had in a very long time. I only read 49 books in 2023. That's like unheard of for me. In 2022, I read like 100. So the fact that I only read 49 in 2023, big yikes. We're combining this into one video. Do you want me to talk about my worst or my best first? You don't really get a say because you're not here. I think we'll start with the worst because that's what you bitches want to know. You want to hear me shit talk books, and then we'll talk about the best because the true homies will stick around to hear what books they should read in 2024. I hope you find some good recommendations from this. I'm not giving the general disclaimer about my least favorite books. If you're gonna be upset that I disliked a book, that's your own problem, so there's the disclaimer. Do I have anything else to add before starting this? I don't think so. I am literally gonna have to consult my Goodreads because that's what kind of reading year I had. I had such a crazy year, like outside of reading in 2023, that I didn't really put forth the effort into reading, or couldn't. I didn't really have time because I bought a house, that's where I am right now, and renovated the whole thing, so there's a lot going on. I'm literally looking at Goodreads to figure out what my worst and best books of the year were. So we're just gonna kind of go in order based on what I see, and then I'll tell you about them. The only reason I still own this is because I liked the first book in this series and loved the second, but the one I hated was Final Offer. I actually DNF'd this at like 60 to 80%, somewhere around there. I truly did not care for it much. I was really looking forward to this one, and so like me DNFing it, I don't know if that means it was disappointing or it was bad. I think I DNF'd it because it was bad, but like maybe it redeemed itself. But what I found bad about it was the writing style. We have a first-person perspective, and when the character is narrating their thoughts slash feelings for us, they kind of talk to themselves in a way. It feels like we are literally planted in that character's mind, but not in a good way because I have an internal voice that they're talking to. I literally pulled an example in my Goodreads review, so let me find it so I can like actually cite a moment that I absolutely hated. So the dialogue is, "You sound jealous." Probably because I am. Girl, you're talking to yourself. I fully know that authors will sometimes narrate a character's internal dialogue. That's to be expected. But them conversating with their internal dialogue, that is weird. And I noticed that a lot throughout this book. It follows Callahan, who is one of the Kane brothers, and Alana. It's a second chance romance too, and she has a kid. It seemed a lot like something I would enjoy. Typically, I don't know, I'm 50-50 on books with kids or not, but I love a second chance romance. So I was like, yes, second chance romance. It did not need to be this long. Number one, it could have been that long and skipped all this crap. We would have been fine. Frankly, that's still too many. I have 392 pages. Maybe I'll try this again in the future. I don't think I will. I still own it because I love the whole first two books. So I'm like, maybe I should hold on to this one and try and reread it someday just because I was so disappointed. But that's enough about this. I've still got to talk about my favorite books, so let me dedicate some good time to those. This is so tricky because this is another one. I guess like a lot of my worst books of the year were actually just disappointing books because I don't think I had anything that I like hated this year. But a very disappointing book is... Are you gonna get mad at me? Are you gonna get mad at me? You might get mad at me. I don't think you're gonna get mad at me. I think a lot of people agree with me. Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This follows the events of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, which we will discuss later. I was just kind of let down by where this plot took us. It felt like it was setting up for a lot of things, and some of the big reveals weren't exactly big reveals because the reader could figure them out based on things that Rebecca did with her writing. I just feel like another 6 to 8 months of editing, honestly, could have really improved this book. I think there were things that could have been cut out. I think that certain things should have been more developed and could have been more developed. I think there were a lot of plot holes, and in general, just it didn't feel as curated and edited as I wanted it to. I also think that with the pressure of Fourth Wing, a follow-up to that, like how Fourth Wing just blew up and took off, I think we got a sequel too quickly. And I think that's because of the hype around Fourth Wing, that it was like, let's capitalize on this and go ahead and put the second one out without doing all the typical editing and curating that we typically would, and I think that's where this book fails. I'm interested to see if I think there's more. I will like continue on. I think I gave this like a 3.5 star. All in all, like it wasn't a bad read, but I loved Fourth Wing. We'll talk about that later. But so much so that I thought it might have been better than ACOTAR, which is saying a lot. I was like, it could have been better than ACOTAR. The fact that that's how I felt about the first book, and I was telling all my friends, like, you have to read this right now. You have to read it. Like, I can't wait to talk to you about it. And then I'm like, on the second one, disappointing. One more. This was my first foray, I would say, into horror. Maybe that's not true. I think I've read like maybe 1 or 2 horror before. This was my first foray into this type of horror, and that is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I listened to this on audiobook and did a little bit of ebook reading with it. I read this while I was in Japan. I did not like this. It follows our main character, who I don't remember the name of, and she has gotten a call that her parents have passed away. She goes to visit their home. She has a daughter back at home. She goes to her parents' house to kind of set all the affairs in order, one of which being selling the house. Her brother is kind of like, I don't want to sell the house. She's like, I do. They don't really have a great relationship. And through the process of them trying to sell the house, we find out about a puppet named Pumpkin, who is apparently haunting this house. It was stupid. I don't recommend it. The plot wasn't great. And Pumpkin was stupid. For this being one of like my first adventures into like a spooky haunted horror, I wasn't spooked, haunted, or horrified at all. Those are my worst and disappointing books of the year. I didn't have that many because I didn't read many books this year, so now we get to talk about the fun one, which is the best books of the year. I'm gonna save my top book of 2023 for the end, but the rest of them are in no particular order. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Remember how I said that the second one was one of my most disappointing? Well, the reason it was so disappointing is because the first was so good. This follows our main character, Violet, who goes to a training academy to train for like a dragon military type thing. Her mom is kind of like in charge of the school. It's got similar like magic school vibes, but for dragon training. And there's a lot of high stakes because there are so many different parts of the dragon training. Each of those steps can result in fatalities, basically. So there's a lot at stake for our main character, Violet, who is not fit for this. She was going to be a scribe like her father and kind of gets forced into the Riders Quadrant. So that is who we follow here. Then she meets Zayden, who leads one of the other divisions of the Riders Quadrant. And he seems to be working for or participating in a rebellion against the people who are running the school / government there. Since Violet's mom works for the government school situation, she's not too fond of that. Rivals / enemies to lovers type vibes. If you haven't read this already, it's gonna be on like pretty much everybody's favorite that read it this year. Just go ahead and pick it up. I mean, it's like really, really popular, but if you're picking this up, maybe you can now not expect amazing things from the second. Maybe you won't be as disappointed as a lot of us were. But I was very excited to read this. I was boasting about it for a while, saying it was my favorite of the year for a good minute. It just really blew me out of the water, and I loved it. And I think my opinion of it has like toned down a little bit since the second. So it's not my favorite of the year, but thoroughly enjoyed. I was saying this was comparable to ACOTAR at some point. So like, you know. So I traveled to Japan this year. That was a super fun trip. And one of the things that I wanted to prioritize with this trip was reading a book either set in Japan or by a Japanese author. I got both. This is a translated work by a Japanese author, Kane Minato, and that is Confessions. This follows our main character, Yuko, who is a teacher, and her daughter passes away suddenly, seemingly by suspicious circumstances. She then puts in a resignation for the school she is teaching at, and on her last day, decides to unravel the world around her and reveal things about her daughter's murder. This book is short, but my god, is it good. Each chapter follows a different perspective, and at the end of each chapter, you are going, what the hell? There is something new that happens pretty much every single time. And there's another puzzle piece added to this that makes it a crazy whirlwind of a story that just kind of sucks you in. There are a few repeating points of view, but like largely you get so many different perspectives on the situation and a few different timelines as well. It is truly one of the most captivating reads I have ever read. I read this all physically. When we were in Japan, I was like standing on the trains like flipping through this. I was so caught up in this story. It just truly takes you for an adventure. You think you know what's going on, and then it's like, oh, by the way, this happened. Oh, remember that thing that happened? Well, this also happened. Can I gesture more about this book? It was so interesting and just a crazy adventure, and maybe it threw a few too many twists in there if that's not your speed, but it's totally mine, and that is why it's one of my favorite books of the year. I have one book that's on my favorite books of the year. I typically do not rate nonfiction. They can still end up in my favorites, of course, but I typically don't assign a 5-star rating to them. A lot of the times, it just feels like, how can you rate history, or how can you rate someone's personal experience in a memoir, or, you know, like all of those things. Sure, you can do it based on solely the writing, but inherently the story becomes a part of that, and that just feels weird for me to rate. That's a personal thing. However, I did rate this one because the whole premise of the book is rating different elements of the human experience on a 5-star scale. And that is the Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I cannot tell you how many times I had to learn how to pronounce this. I love this book. So like I said, it follows different elements of the human experience. Each chapter is centered around a different subject. The Anthropocene, I believe, is the current age of humanity in which we all live in terms of like the scientific, historical, blah, 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 whatever. It doesn't matter. He will take a simple thing as part of the human experience, such as Diet Dr. Pepper, talk a little bit about the history of Diet Dr. Pepper, talk about his personal experience with Diet Dr. Pepper, and rate it on a 5-star scale at the end of the chapter. I thoroughly enjoyed this. There was one chapter about Mario Kart, which he took the little question boxes and equated them to having privilege in America and the system of privilege in America, and how in Mario Kart, if you are further back, you get something that boosts you up a little bit further, whereas if you're in first place, you get something like 3 bananas or a banana, and you have less of a boost because you're already so far ahead. And he kind of brings that back to the human experience of social justice in America. It was one of my favorite chapters. There's also like a chapter on a tree, scratch and sniff stickers. I mean, there's so many different things that he goes into, and it's amazing how he was able to take these seemingly arbitrary things and connect them to the human experience in such a way, and like it just shows such broad, intelligent thinking that I was so impressed. This was an easy 5 stars. I kind of only have, I think, 1 romance. Is that true? On my favorites? Considering I'm such a big romance reader, that feels weird to say. Do I Know You by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegeman Broca was one of my favorite romances of the year. Shockingly, this is a second chance romance. It follows our main characters, Eliza and Graham. They are off to a little anniversary getaway. I think that Graham's parents paid for at this like luxury resort. They are actually not having the best time in their marriage right now. They go to this resort seemingly just having an anniversary, and the tension is like off the charts, but not in a sexy hot way, in an awkward way. What then follows is they both kind of end up at a bar at this resort, and someone that Graham has been sitting next to, because they arrive at separate times, he's been talking to this guy and he kind of introduces him and like, this is my buddy Graham, and Eliza plays along with it, and they decide that they're going to, air quote, fake date or fake get to know each other, act like strangers throughout this vacation in order to see if they can find their spark for one another again. It was so fun to watch these characters who know each other really well learn so much about one another through this process. Acting like they didn't know each other allowed them to find out more things about their relationship, see where their relationship was failing, and be able to address that in a different way. And it was just, I love a second chance romance. I know some people are like, the stakes are too high. It's a romance book, you know it's gonna work out. And I just love being able to see 2 people who already know each other, who already have a connection and foundation for their relationship that are like drifting apart, find little things about one another that they loved in order to grow back together. That's what I think I really like. That's why I like second chance romances, is because it's fun to watch two characters notice the little details rather than be like, he's so attractive. It'd be like, I've never noticed how his eyes look like this when he sees something like this. I don't know, it's just, I love the little details of falling in love, and that's what a second chance romance gives me every time. I actually gave this 4.5 stars. There was something that kept me from giving it 5 stars. I don't remember what it was, but I look back really fondly on this when I think about my books that I read this year. If this is your first video of mine, hi, welcome. If not, you may have seen that I reread the entirety of the A Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy. Some of the videos are still coming out, so stay tuned, but you know that I read them. I reread the first 4 books in the trilogy, so like the trilogy and then the novella, in preparation to read A Court of Silver Flames this year. That being said, I'm gonna put like the whole thing in this video. Rereading the A Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy really allowed me to remind myself of why I love those characters. It's been so long since I originally read them that I kind of forgotten. Friends would talk to me about it since it's all the rage right now on Book Talk. And I'd be like, yeah, I remember that a little bit. And they'd be like, remember when the cereal does this? I'm like, no, not exactly, because I read them so long ago. It's like goldfish brain up here sometimes. Being able to like fall in love with those characters and see things through the lens of having already read them before was fascinating. If you want a more in-depth review of each individual book, there's dedicated videos to them. Some of them are still coming out, like I said, but you can wait for them. But it was just like really interesting, especially in A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Wings and Ruin, knowing I loved the book and did not like the book respectively, to notice little things that have been different or remember things that I loved so much the first time and be able to experience the books through a new lens. Because I think having read them before, you know kind of generally what's coming up next, so you're able to focus on different stuff rather than like the larger plot at hand. You can notice the details. It's all in the details, people. That's the whole point of this video. All in the details. What? Okay, I'm glad I got that. I'll have to send that to her. That's amazing. Oh my god! My friend just got engaged! And her ring is beautiful and her nails are beautiful! Ah! Back to what I was talking about. Oh my god, that's perfect timing. Now it's time to talk about my favorite book of the year. Oh my god, and it has to do with wedding planning! This could not be more perfect of a time for her to text me. I'm crying. Oh my god, leave me alone. My favorite book of the year was Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. This follows our main character Amma, who is a wedding planner, and our male main character named Elliot, who runs a flower shop. Elliot kind of grew up in this flower shop and has inherited it from his family. Amma used to work for a major wedding planner in the industry and in her town, and has decided to foray into her own business. She has the opportunity to work with a super mega social media client. However, her one condition is they have to work with Bloom. Bloom is the flower shop that Elliot runs. So these two are forced together to work on this massive, massive wedding opportunity. Neither of them are going to give it up because the exposure is through the roof. And so they're having to work together to come up with this perfect wedding for their client. But neither of them really like each other because they used to know each other. They had a little fling a while ago. Things didn't work out. They haven't really talked since. That's no bueno. I read this based off of my best friend Whitney's recommendation. Whitney absolutely loved it and was like, you have to read this. Like, I'm kicking my feet giggling. And I was like, okay, fine, but like, I'm not gonna be kicking my feet giggling. Fast forward, I'm like, kicking my feet giggling. Forget Me Not by Julie Soto is absolutely one of the best books of the year. I was so captivated by this romance. I loved learning about these characters. I had a video for it. I decided to delete it because I never really finished it and it wasn't a good video. Just know, this is one of the best books this year. And if you're gonna pick up anything from this video, if you are into a romance with a little bit of tension, a little bit of steam, not too high, well, I guess high stakes because it's her whole business on the line, but not like emotional high stakes. Rather, I highly recommend this one to you. That concludes my favorites and least favorites of 2023. Overall, like an underwhelming year. I'm looking forward to what 2024 can bring, and I hope you'll join me for the ride. Make sure to click the subscribe button below and like the video and do all the YouTube-y stuff. It feels weird mentioning that, but like I feel like I should, especially because best and worst books are one of the more popular videos on BookTube around this time. So if you're new here, hey, come hang out. I'm cool sometimes. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy reading!